Hi, I'm Becky Swansburg, co-author of The New Holistic Retirement and the No Compromise Retirement Plan. And today, I want to help you understand one of the biggest, least understood retirement risks facing savers like you and me, and that's legislative risk. Now, what is legislative risk and how might it impact your retirement? Legislative risk is the risk that Congress changes the rules, and those changes negatively impact your retirement assets. Now, you may be at heightened risk for legislative changes if, like the vast majority of all Americans, you've saved all or most of your retirement assets in tax-deferred vehicles. And here's why. Tax-deferred vehicles, that would be 401ks, IRAs, 403bs, in all of these vehicles, we have deferred our taxes to the future in retirement. And that means that any tax or legislative changes between today and the day you take that last dollar out of your IRA or 401k could result in less money for you to spend in retirement and more money being sent to the IRS in Washington in the form of taxes. Now, why do I feel that it is critical today for savers like you to be focused on legislative risk and mitigating the risk of rising taxes? Well, it's because of my background. I started my career in government in Washington, D.C. I worked in the White House under George W. Bush, and then I moved over to Capitol Hill, where I worked for the Speaker of the House and a variety of members of Congress. And I'll tell you, in all my time in Washington, I never experienced a period of heightened legislative risk around retirement savings like we're experiencing today. And if you've watched the news lately, it's pretty obvious why. Congress and the president have been busy at work debating new legislation and new laws, everything from an expansion of social welfare benefits to new climate change and green energy tax credits to transportation infrastructure spending. And of course, to help fund all of these new programs and ideas, Congress and the president have spent a lot of time debating new and expanded taxes. Now, for experts in our industry, myself included, this doesn't really come as a surprise. We've known for years that taxes are likely to go up in the near term. Our federal deficit currently sits at over $28 trillion. And we've had, obviously, the addition of all the pandemic spending and the economic stimulus. What's surprising about this round of debates and discussion in Washington is that they focused around deriving new and expanded taxes from retirement savings vehicles. And that could have a big impact on your retirement. So let's look at some of the provisions and ideas that have been bouncing around Washington in the halls of Congress. We have seen everything from limits on contributions to tax-deferred vehicles like IRAs and 401ks for some savers. The idea there being, if there are limits on contributions, more of your annual income will be obviously taxable. We've seen provisions debating eliminating or limiting Roth conversions for some savers. The idea there being that they can no longer protect the growth of their retirement assets in a tax-free vehicle like a Roth 401k or IRA, and it will have to be subject to growing tax-deferred and eventually being taxed by the government. We've even seen provisions limiting the total amount of retirement assets that a U.S. saver can accumulate, and requiring a new required minimum distribution or annual withdrawal from accounts that go above that limit. The idea there, of course, being that any excess funds would then have to be withdrawn and taxed. So, a lot of new tax provisions being discussed around retirement savings. What does it mean? I have three big takeaways for you today. The first takeaway is quite simple. Taxes are going up, and you have to be prepared. We knew already before the current debate in Washington that with our deficit and with the excessive economic stimulus spending of 2020, that we were going to need to raise taxes in the short term. Now, with all this new spending and debate, it's looking more likely than ever. Point number 2. I like to think that this debate has kind of pulled back the curtain on Congress's intentions, and we've gotten a sneak peek into some of the ways Congress might work to raise new tax revenue. And one of the places that we now know they're going to look for new and expanded tax revenue is, of course, retirement savings vehicles. So we know taxes are going up. We know that one place Congress is likely to look is retirement savings, so we need to be prepared. Now, the third takeaway is that all these changes could impact you. Now, I talk to a lot of savers who say, Becky, all of these provisions being debated in Washington, they're being debated for people of much higher net worth than me that have more annual income or more retirement assets. So I don't need to worry. They probably won't impact me. And I want to caution you against that line of thinking. From all my time in Washington, I can tell you the hard part is getting new laws passed, getting something new on the books about how we tax retirement assets. Do you know what the easy part is? Just setting the limit. How much are we going to tax and at what level? That's the easy part. So if we know that Congress is passing new spending bills, and we know that the tax provisions in those bills can't even cover the cost of the new spending provided for in that bill, we know taxes are going up. We know Congress is going to have to find a way to broaden the tax base and apply these new taxes to a larger swath of American savers. So what do we do about it? We know taxes are going up. We know they're looking at retirement savings, and there's a good chance that savers at many income levels will be subject to some of these new taxes. What do we do? 2 things. The first is educate yourself about legislative risk and the risk of rising taxes. We have to think and evaluate how much of our retirement assets we want exposed to these kinds of risks, and look at some strategies and ways that we can diversify our retirement assets to help protect them from legislative risk and the risk of rising taxes. Now, some of that diversification will be the tax status of our retirement assets, and some of that diversification may be asset classes. The good news is you don't have to figure it out on your own, because the second most important thing that you can do today is find a financial professional who is an expert in legislative risk and the risk of rising taxes, and a financial professional that helps clients and savers like you identify these risks, quantify these risks, and then make sure that their assets are protected against these risks. Now, nobody likes surprises in retirement. And I truly believe that if you make a commitment right now to understanding your legislative risk and the risk of rising taxes, and working with a financial professional who can help you mitigate those risks, you will be able to protect your assets in retirement and make sure that you have the full income you are depending on to fuel a happy and successful retirement that you've envisioned. That's one of the greatest gifts you can give yourself right now. And that way you'll be protected no matter what Washington may send down the line.